The confirmation vote, as we noted, is finally over. Now Justice Kavanaugh preparing for his first day on the job at the Supreme Court next week. How will his presence on the court impact it? They're already in session. Joining us from Washington to help answer that question, Elizabeth Wydra. She's the president of the Constitutional Accountability Center. We appreciate you joining us tonight.
Great to be with you.
So, you know, it was interesting. I was live on the air last night when Lisa Murkowski was delivering her floor speech Friday evening about which way she would vote. We knew that she was planning to go no, but as we heard her mid-speech, we thought maybe she was saying yes, because at one point she said, "I've come to believe that Judge Kavanaugh is more in line with her as a pro-choice Republican." And in her words, she doesn't think he would vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I was thinking maybe she's going to become a yes. She ended up voting present, of course. But my broader question is, a month ago, if a swing vote like that had felt he wasn't going to vote to overturn Roe, she would have been a yes before all of these sexual misconduct allegations. And it reminded me that we haven't talked about some of these big issues like abortion, same-sex marriage, all kinds of religious liberty. Instead, it's all been about sexual misconduct. What kind of a justice do you think he'll be?
Well, I think that's frankly a good point. You know, when President Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh, it was after a campaign in which he repeatedly talked about how he wanted to mold a Supreme Court that would overturn Roe versus Wade, that would gut the Affordable Care Act, that would expand gun rights. And frankly, listening to Senator Collins' speech when she seemed to describe him as this centrist who would not do all of those things. Yeah. You know, I can't imagine that Trump and all of the other Republicans we're seeing celebrating tonight would be celebrating if he was going to be that kind of justice on the Supreme Court. Yeah. So I think a lot of those protesters that we're seeing engage with such passion are going to continue that momentum when we start to see rulings that do limit the right to abortion, that do perhaps start to strike at the core of the protections of the Affordable Care Act. And that's only going to energize the liberal side of the aisle even more. Yeah, and that gets right at my question, which is everyone's been shouting at one another and maybe hasn't been paying attention to both the 300 decisions, the opinions that he had written on the second highest court in the land, because they were talking about all the controversies in recent days. But they didn't listen closely to what Susan Collins said, and you just referred to it. Let's hear that, and I want to get your reaction on the other side. Here's what Collins said.
That Judge Kavanaugh is more of a centrist than some of his critics maintain is reflected in the fact that he and Chief Judge Merrick Garland voted the same way in 93% of the cases that they heard together. Indeed, Chief Judge Garland joined in more than 96% of the majority opinions authored by Judge Kavanaugh, dissenting only once.
Elizabeth, it feeds perfectly into your point, which is that, number one, she said the magic words Merrick Garland, the person that Democrats have wanted on the high court, and sort of makes Republicans say, whoa, wait a second. And she called him a centrist, as you noted a moment ago. So my broader question is, while there is celebration tonight at the White House, is this someone who might be less conservative on the court than conservatives think?
I have absolutely no idea why Senator Collins thinks that. I've read Judge Kavanaugh's opinions from the D.C. Circuit, and even many of his conservative colleagues think that sometimes his opinions go too far. So I have no idea what she's talking about, other than maybe trying to save herself from feeling bad when she wakes up in the morning and looks in the mirror. But perhaps. He is not a centrist, for sure.
Yeah, maybe try to explain her vote, you know, and say, look, she's trying to speak to the left and say he's not as conservative as you think, perhaps, and we'll see how his record plays out.
Trump wouldn't have nominated him if he wasn't going to strike down Roe versus Wade. So you only have to listen to the president.
Right, and he said that in the debate with Chris Wallace, that he expected he would nominate pro-life judges, as he has with both Neil Gorsuch and now Brett Kavanaugh. And he said then it would be overturned and will go back to the states. So what else are you looking for? For example, people haven't talked about the economy, government regulation. This is someone who on the Court of Appeals, then Judge Kavanaugh, was very aggressive, as the president has been, in trying to do away with government regulations that have helped bring this economy up.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, you know, a lot of conservatives are very happy to have Judge Kavanaugh be Justice Kavanaugh, because a lot of the rollback of economic, environmental, consumer protection, health care, civil rights litigation, regulations can often only be rolled back through litigation with conservative judges because, as we've seen with, for example, the Affordable Care Act, the American public supports most of those protections and regulations, and so you're not going to achieve it through the political process. So they look to conservative judges who want, you know, this extremely smaller government to be in place and will strike down those regulations.